Out of Shadows is a documentary by Mike Smith about the presence of government influence on modern media, particularly cinema, and how that relates to the child trafficking crisis in Hollywood, as well as the Pizzagate conspiracy theory. At time of recording, it currently has 18 million views, and the channel it was posted on has 300,000 subscribers. This is surprising, given that the documentary is complete dog shit. The entire thing feels like they recorded random interview footage with the director and 3 other subjects, and then tried to piece that interview footage together to make sense. I say make sense with giant quotation marks. There is no thesis. I said that this movie is about Hollywood and Pizzagate, but it's also about like 17 other things. It's basically just a bunch of loosely associated ideas strung together in this free associative stream of consciousness style. Some of these ideas are brought up and then completely abandoned right after and never brought up again. You have to really read between the lines to even figure out what the main idea of this movie is, which basically boils down to, it's the Satanists. On top of all the structural problems, there's also just a bunch of voiceover and editing mistakes, and I am not above nitpicking those for the sake of comedy. Now, just to be clear, I'm not implying that this movie is dog shit just because it talks about Pizzagate. This video isn't going to be an attempt to debunk the entire Pizzagate conspiracy theory. That's way bigger than the scope I had planned for this. That would take hours of research that I don't have time to do. Instead, I'm going to focus on the individual failings of this movie. And if you believe Pizzagate, hopefully you can still get some enjoyment out of this movie and recognize that this is just not a good conspiracy theory video. I will, however, absolutely imply that this movie is dog shit because of the anti-Satanism stuff. We'll talk more about that later. So if this video is so bad, why is it so popular? Let's talk about it. My name's Joe, aka Wolfboy, and this is Media FX. Part 1. Free association. Or, the Holly in Hollywood is a reference to druids. As I said before, there is no main thesis to this movie. The stated purpose of it is to start a conversation about the topics it introduces.
That video was made to start a conversation to get people to consider, what if you're not getting the truth from the sources you believe are telling you the truth?
And that's totally fine. It's okay if this movie was just trying to be a list of interesting facts about the media. However, there still has to be some kind of connective tissue between the ideas, something to go from one idea to the next. At one point in the video, Kevin Shipp starts talking about how the CIA was unintentionally responsible for the popularity of LSD in the 60s.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement.
After about 2 minutes of that section, Mike Smith goes on a tangent about how Jared Leto now owns a deactivated Air Force base on Laurel Canyon. After 30 seconds of this, they begin talking about honeypot operations done by the CIA. What does Jared Leto owning a deactivated Air Force base have to do with the section that came before or after? Basically nothing. I found on repeated watches that they do actually mention the Air Force base on Laurel Canyon.
Laurel Canyon was the epitome of the summer of love. I mean, we saw the possibility of the way we could live.
But they only mention it like once or twice in passing, and they don't explicitly say why Jared Leto now owning the Air Force base is important. They just expect you to assume it is important. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot to mention, in the LSD section, they talk about how several famous musicians from that era were related to personnel in the Air Force or military.
It's odd because in Laurel Canyon, so many of the soon-to-be stars there, their parents were in either the military-industrial complex or intelligence or the Pentagon.
Again, they don't explicitly say why they bring this up. You're just supposed to assume it's important. I think they're trying to imply by showing this that these people must be involved with the government somehow. They're probably trying to imply that Jared Leto is somehow involved with the Air Force because he now owns the deactivated Air Force base. But because they don't explicitly make these claims, they basically come off as non sequiturs that have nothing to do with anything else in the movie. Even if they did make these claims explicitly, owning a deactivated Air Force base or having a dad in the Air Force is not the same thing as being in the Air Force. Maybe these filmmakers knew that they couldn't actually substantiate these claims, so they left them out of the movie. But if they left the claims out of the movie, why leave the evidence for the claims in? Were they just trying to pad the movie out to be feature length? Oh, that's why they did it. But if you think the claims they don't explicitly make are bonkers, wait until you hear the ones they do explicitly make. The most extreme example of this free associative style is the television section, where Mike Smith goes over the secret meanings of certain common words.
What are they called? TVs. But if you stop and you say the word television, television.
I can't even think of a joke to express how I feel about this, so I'm just gonna keep showing it.
Now, let's take the word Hollywood. Where does that come from? Well, Hollywood comes from the holly tree. And the ancient Druids, back in the day, used to take the holly tree, make wands to weave spells, cast spells, or channel spells.
Fun fact, the way that Hollywood got its name is actually a bit of a mystery. There are several somewhat conflicting stories about how Data and Harvey Wilcox came up with the name. I guess we can add they were druids to the list of theories. Another wild and unsubstantiated claim that this movie makes is that MKUltra is continuing to this day as an effort to destabilize the United States and other industrialized countries.
Aquino's thesis stated that enemy populations could be subdued by inflicting a state of psychological terror and feelings of imminent destruction. He discusses the use of psychotronic weapons and electromagnetic weapons.
Do you want to do that take again, dude? It's a voiceover. You can just re-record it. You can just do another. Please, just do another take, please.
These ongoing MKUltra operations are functioning as a counterinsurgency and infiltration operation aimed at destabilizing the United States and other industrialized nations.
That's a pretty serious accusation, Mike. Who do you think is behind this? What do you think their motives are? Do you have any evidence to back up this claim? Well, where's my phone? Well, let's see what he says directly after this.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating...
Wait, this is just the LSD section again. I don't want to hear about Jared Leto buying property. I want to know who the people trying to destabilize the West are. You'd think a huge claim like this would come at the beginning or end of the movie. You could make a whole documentary just defending or debunking this one claim. But instead it comes at the 42-minute mark of this 78-minute documentary? This section comes directly after one discussing Satanism, so again, maybe they're implying that the Satanists are the ones trying to destabilize all industrialized nations. But again, this claim is never explicitly made. I basically have to guess what the main idea of this movie is as I'm watching it. This actually leads to a theory of mine. Maybe it's intentional that they don't explicitly make any of these claims. Maybe they don't want to alienate the audience, so they let the audience fill it in with whatever they believe. The people trying to destabilize all industrialized countries could be anyone you want. Satanists, Christians, cultural Marxists, the Jews, Nazis, aliens. It could be anyone. Babe, who's someone funny that I could blame, I don't know, a global conspiracy on? Like, I'm doing a bit. I'm gonna go with Jack Thompson. I think that's gonna be the funniest. So yeah, maybe that vagueness is how this video got so popular. If you agree with the statement, there are bad people in the government, you basically agree with everything that this movie explicitly says. Was this intentional? Has Mike Smith secretly been a genius director this whole time? Well... Part 2. Mike Smith doesn't understand art. This movie is just full of baffling takes that show a complete lack of understanding of the entertainment industry as a whole. Now, I can't blame Mike Smith for this completely. There are 3 other subjects being interviewed. However, Mike is the director, so he has final say on which of these takes make it into the final product. CIA whistleblower Kevin Shipp cites Katy Perry as a damning example of the anti-Christian influence of the modern music industry.
A classic example, at least for me, is Katy Perry. Katy Perry was a gospel singer, very talented, but she was going nowhere. And she got up to Hollywood, and basically they said, you want to be a success? You play by our rules. You step into the occult, and you start putting that in your videos. And now she's doing videos with her in hell with satanic themes, and she's what? Highly successful.
Okay, first of all, that's not satanic imagery in that one. That's Egyptian imagery, but whatever. So you're saying Katy Perry was more popular making pop music than she was making gospel music? No shit. What do you think pop stands for? That's not a sign that she was converted to Satanism. That's just the free market at work. On the subject of bad takes about pop singers, former journalist Liz Crokin brings up a weird parallel between child sexual abuse and Lady Gaga doing performance art.
She said that Marina did an exercise with her where she stripped her completely naked and left her in the middle of the woods to fend for herself and find her way back. Those are the kinds of things that people who are behind the MK Ultra programs do to children that they're mind controlling.
Okay, are you saying that Lady Gaga is being brainwashed in this footage? If so, don't they have to brainwash them before they get famous so that they have them under control?
They will not let someone obtain a lot of fame and power if they can't control you.
Why did they wait until 2013 to do it after she had already had a #2 and a #1 album? Is this the second time they're doing it? Do they have to do it like every couple of years, like a satanic oil change? But these are both takes about pop singers. Mike Smith is from the film industry, not the music industry, so maybe he understands that one better. Let's see what his fellow former stuntman Brad Martin has to say about a common Disney trope.
Every Disney movie, there's a major character, usually a parent, that gets killed. Trauma to the child. Why? It's so horrible. What a bad story. Why do you need to start a story with a parent dying? Always. It's so sad.
Because conflict is how you write good stories, Brad. You have to have an inciting incident that leads the character to take action and be forced out of their comfort zone. This is storytelling 101. Why do I have to explain this to someone who worked in Hollywood?
Under MK Ultra, they experimented on children. We were even taught this in psychophysiology program that if you get to a child between ages 1 and 6 or 1 or 8, especially with sexual abuse or sexual trauma, you will split their personality and they will be imprinted the rest of their life. And many times that results in split personalities and dissociative behavior and other things.
I had to show this clip in full because it just baffles me. The way this is edited implies that Disney animators writing sex on frames because they're bored is equivalent to sexually abusing children. It implies that drawing dicks on the cover of The Little Mermaid is giving kids multiple personality disorder. Also, this frame from Monsters, Inc., it's fake. It's photoshopped. You fell for a meme. Not only does this documentary condemn sex and violence in movies, it also seemingly condemns depictions of magic as occult imagery. At least that's what the editing in this section implies.
These occult topics are being introduced to our kids, and most parents aren't even aware of it.
Now, if you were to make the argument that you shouldn't show Disney movies to kids, while I wouldn't agree with you, I could see where you were coming from. I mean, hell, Fantasia was pretty traumatizing. But Mike goes on to list several horror movies aimed at adults as examples of occult imagery.
So the biggest surge with this occult type material took place in the late 60s and the early 70s with movies like The Exorcist, Amityville Horror, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, and Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby.
This is basically the Satanic Panic all over again. Anything that depicts magic or fantasy or any kind of conflict is deemed morally wrong and satanic in nature. This is just like when they tried to ban Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s. Kevin Shipp then says that satanic cults have infiltrated the schools and the government and describes a prominent NSA member who was an open Satanist. Again, I must ask, what does this have to do with the section before? We were talking about horror movies. Are the Satanists directing the horror movies to promote Satanism? I've never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I'm pretty sure that Leatherface never takes out a Bible of the Church of Set. It's because of these sections that I find Mike's closing statement to be very ironic. He claims that the reason media is violent, sexual, horrific is because they are filtered by Hollywood. And he expresses a desire to create a platform that is unfiltered.
What does the media look like in the future? Well, to me, what I would hope is that it's not filtered. I would love to build a platform or build some sort of system where artists could connect directly to their audience.
Here's the thing, Mike. A platform like that already exists. It's YouTube. And let me tell you, there is no shortage of sex, violence, and horror on YouTube. Movies, songs, and games don't include violence, sex, and horror because Satanists are trying to influence the children. They're in there because people want violence, sex, and horror. There's a supply to meet the demand. Come on, Mike, you're a Trump supporter. Aren't you supposed to believe in the free market? Part 3. Satan. I've mentioned a couple of times that this movie heavily implies that Satanists are to blame for the issues it presents. This may be an admission of personal bias, but the moment someone starts to bring up the Satanists and say that they're responsible for the ills of the world, I tend to disregard everything that they're saying. Here's why. According to Jeffrey Victor in his book Satanic Panic, The Creation of a Contemporary Legend, the first modern claim of satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, in the United States was made in the book Michelle Remembers by Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pasda. Victor claims that the publishing of this book, as well as Smith meeting with the parents and children involved in the McMartin case, are responsible for the large number of claims of SRA in the 1980s. Nowadays, the book Michelle Remembers is largely discredited. Debbie Nathan and Michael Snedeker say of the events depicted in the book, there is no independent verification for them. Indeed, there is much to contradict them. That's smart people talk for you're full of shit. In other words, the wider movement of blaming Satanism for pedophilia is based on a discredited book and the influence of the author of that discredited book. I said at the beginning of this video that I wouldn't try to debunk Pizzagate, and I stand by that, partly because the belief that several politicians and celebrities are actually pedophiles is actually not a controversial take. But the moment you start to imply that those pedophiles are actually Satanists, I will start to believe that you have been influenced by propaganda. Not just propaganda, but propaganda from 40 years ago. It's time to find a new scapegoat. Part 4. It's just bad. Here's where I'm just gonna point out the random nitpicks that I couldn't fit anywhere else in the script. We see at least 2 different illustrations of Plato's allegory of the cave in this movie, because it's a visual metaphor for how you're supposed to unchain yourself from the wall of illusion. I guess they thought a Matrix reference would be too on the nose, and I guess the red pill has a different connotation these days. They decide to put a caption on screen explaining the illustration. However, they only put a caption on the second time they show an illustration, not the first, because I guess the first one didn't count. I don't know why they bothered to add a caption at all. They never cite their sources in this movie. There's no on-screen notation, there's no bibliography in the description. They link to their merch store and website though. Maybe the website has a bibliography. Oh, nope, I guess it doesn't. There's not even credits at the end of the movie, so not only do I not know what sources they're citing, I don't even know who worked on this movie. IMDb doesn't know either. I can't even find out the name of the guy who did the narration. It doesn't sound like Mike Smith. I guess no one wanted their names attached to this except for the people being interviewed. Well, it makes sense that the editor wouldn't want his name attached to this because this isn't great work. At one point, they transition from one clip to another clip, which is actually a compilation of several newscasters all reading from the same script. This is a really cool transition in theory. Each new clip slowly covers up the previous clip, and the talking grows in volume until you can hear what they're saying. But the editor was too lazy to mask out each individual video, so instead they just key out the color black, which means some of the newscasters' clothes are also keyed out. Look, I get it. I'm a lazy editor too. I'd probably do something like this, but I make YouTube videos. This is a movie that took 2 years to make and is feature length. Also, this isn't a nitpick, but it's arguably my favorite part about the movie, so I really want to talk about it. So, in the first 30 minutes of the movie, Mike Smith talks about how he went from working in Hollywood to believing in this anti-Hollywood conspiracy theory. He had an injury on his lower back, and he couldn't work as a stuntman anymore, and he had to start seeing a pelvic floor therapist. And then, one day, his pelvic floor therapist said, "You have demons around you, let me pray for you."
So one day we're in the middle of therapy and she stops me and she says, "Mike, I feel like you have really dark spirits over you. Can I pray for you?"
And eventually she convinced him that there are Satanists in Hollywood.
I am one of the only pelvic floor therapists in Southern California at the time. And when these satanic people and these evil people do their rituals to little girls and women and boys, who do you think puts them back together? I do. It's completely real, and you need to look into it.
Imagine starting a movie like that, like, I didn't know the truth, but then my pelvic floor therapist told me about the demons. It's hilarious. It's comedy gold. Unlike this movie, I'm going to explicitly tell you what I think and give you a call to action. Don't watch this movie. You could watch it for a laugh, but it's not even that good for a laugh. It's just frustrating. Also, unlike this movie, I've cited my sources in the description if you want to see the bibliography. This guy isn't doing anything to save the children. He's making a video that espouses 40-year-old propaganda in order to sell t-shirts that say woke on them. This movie is basically just a slightly higher budget version of those Illuminati conspiracy theory videos from early YouTube. Except, unlike those videos, this probably won't even inspire any memes. So, 0 out of 10 movie. I hope this video was able to convince some people to not waste their time on this video. And if you were already convinced, I hope you had a laugh watching this, at least. I don't really know how to end a long video essay like this, so I'll just say like and subscribe. Comment what you want me to talk about next. I already have some ideas if nobody has any ideas, but if a bunch of people comment one thing, I might make a video about that. Maybe my next video will not be such a huge H-Bomber guy ripoff. Maybe I'll find the time to actually come up with my own style. No, but seriously, thank you for watching. This has been Media FX. This is Joe, aka Wolfboy, signing out. I just want to give a special shout out to Josh Is Making Music. He provided the 2 tracks that make up the soundtrack of this video. So if you enjoyed the background music, including the track that you're listening to right now, go check out his channel, subscribe to him. He makes really cool synth and sample-based music with a lot of physical analog equipment. Subscribe to him and subscribe to Media FX.